All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack a wild social experiment that tested human endurance, patience, and, honestly, pure sanity to their absolute limits. We are diving deep into MrBeast's legendary last-to-leave mansion keeps it challenge. I mean, just imagine it for a second. Someone tosses you the keys to a gorgeous, multi-million-dollar property, and literally all you have to do to keep it is just outlast everyone else. Sounds like an absolute dream, right? Well, as we're about to see, that dream very quickly spiraled into a psychological and physical nightmare.
Here's the wild part, though. What really makes this challenge unique is the casting. Jimmy didn't just pick a random group of fans. No. He went online and specifically tracked down 15 people who had publicly commented that his videos were way too easy. These were your ultimate backseat drivers. The kind of people who arrogantly bragged that if they were ever in a MrBeast video, they would crush it without even breaking a sweat. And man, they walked through those front doors just brimming with confidence, swearing up and down they would stay in that house for years if they had to. But, well, time for a massive reality check. 119. Yeah, that is the actual, agonizing number of days it took to finally break these super confident internet critics and crown a single winner. We're talking nearly 4 months of confinement, total chaos, and escalating mind games. So let's break down exactly how this illusion of an easy win shattered into a grueling 119-day war of attrition. Starting with Phase 1, the illusion of easy. Okay, so entering this huge, beautiful mansion, we're talking a movie theater, an indoor basketball court, a library, a gym, 7 pristine bedrooms. The contestants felt pretty secure. And the initial rules, they were deceptively simple. Just don't step on the red line marking the exit, and if you want a bed, you better sprint and claim a room first. If everyone else outlasts you, you leave with absolutely nothing. That was literally the whole shebang. No crazy puzzles to solve, no intense physical stunts, just exist. But, human nature mixed with a little bit of claustrophobia, it meant that the piece wouldn't even last 48 hours. The whole descent into chaos was basically sparked by one guy named Chase. Anticipating that things were going to get super competitive, Chase decided to just go ahead and start a psychological war on day 1. His brilliant strategy? He went around the mansion and swiped every single TV remote, instantly removing the group's only real form of entertainment. And true to his word, as you can see there, he literally kicked off the chaos on day 2. And things escalated so fast. When another contestant, Quayle, retaliated by completely trashing Chase's claimed bedroom, Chase absolutely lost his mind. He took his anger out on the entire house. I'm talking stools being hurled off balconies, doors getting smashed, and in just a truly unhinged move, contestants literally started pouring ranch dressing and barbecue sauce all over the expensive carpets and staircases. By the morning of day 2, this pristine million-dollar mansion was a sticky, tension-filled disaster zone. Which brings us to a really fascinating quirk of human psychology. Despite all their massive internet talk, the breaking points for some of these contestants were hilariously low. I mean, within the first few days, one guy actually quit because he missed his cat, Cuddles. Another tapped out because he missed his mom. And I kid you not, on day 10, a contestant literally gave up a $1 million mansion for a $10, 30-count meal of chicken nuggets. The big talk just completely evaporated the second they faced real boredom and a messy living room. And that leads us right into Phase 2, the physical and social toll.
See, because the remaining players were still bragging about how easy this was, Jimmy was more than happy to systematically strip away every comfort they had. The game quickly evolved from just staying inside a red line to being physically tethered to another human, to sleep deprivation, leading all the way up to that crazy ultimate endurance test on day 119.
So the real turning point in Phase 2 was the handcuff challenge. Out of nowhere, Jimmy brings out these heavy metal chains and forces the remaining players to pair up. They are now handcuffed to each other for an undisclosed amount of time. Just think about the psychological strain of that for a second. Zero privacy. You have to awkwardly figure out how to share a bathroom, and you're permanently tethered to someone who is actively trying to make you quit. It instantly broke the sanity of several players who suddenly realized they were in way over their heads.
And right when they finally got those handcuffs off on day 40, Jimmy drops the bunker alarms on them. Totally randomly, at any hour of the day or night, this blaring siren would go off. The contestants had to sprint to a hand scanner and activate it just to stay in the game. When Jimmy dropped that timer to a brutal 30 seconds, the paranoia was off the charts. Imagine being in the shower, completely covered in soap, and suddenly having to sprint dripping wet down the hallway just to keep your $1 million dream alive. Now we shift into Phase 3, isolation and ego.
As the numbers dwindled down to the final 6, the mental toll of just living with these competing personalities became the actual battleground, and we saw two totally opposite survival strategies emerge. On one hand, you've got Asher. Highly intelligent, sure, but notoriously arrogant. He bragged constantly, annoyed everyone, and played purely for his own ego, which just alienated the whole group. On the other hand, there's Uthi. Patient, quiet, and deeply motivated by his singular goal. He wanted to retire his aging dad. Uthi survived by forming friendly bonds and flying under the radar, while Asher's toxic confidence just painted this massive target on his own back.
To test those fragile social bonds, Jimmy unleashed some seriously mind-bending mini-challenges. He actually locked pairs in totally empty isolation rooms for weeks at a time with nothing to do. And while they were stuck in there, a construction crew came in and literally rebuilt and repainted the mansion they had trashed. Later on, a ringing phone forced them into brutal tasks, like Uthi having to sit in a bathtub for 24 hours straight with blaring music pumping in to keep him awake. Jimmy even put Asher's ego to the ultimate test: endure 24 hours in solitary confinement to win $10,000 for a player he actively hated. And shockingly, Asher actually pulled it off, proving he was incredibly resilient, even if he was hard to live with.
All right, that brings us to the brutal climax. Phase 4, the final endurance test.
By this point, only a tiny handful of players are left, and it was time for the most grueling, physically punishing finale in the channel's history. Jimmy gathers the survivors and drops the ultimate rule: hand on the wall. From this second forward, whoever takes their hand off the mansion's surfaces last keeps the house. No sitting comfortably on the couch, no wandering around, just physical contact. A microsecond lapse in concentration, a sneeze, an accidental slip of the wrist, and you instantly lose $1 million. And Jimmy, being the mastermind he is, adds some severe psychological warfare into the mix. He doesn't just enforce the rule, he dumps $600,000 in cold, hard cash right onto the floor. Then he puts his own hand on the wall to compete with them. The deal? If you quit before Jimmy takes his hand off, you walk away with a guaranteed $100,000. But if Jimmy quits first, all that buyout cash vanishes. It was this massive temptation for these completely exhausted players to just grab $100,000 and finally go home. And you know what? It worked. It narrowed the field down to just 2 finalists.
So it all came down to Asher and Uthi, the hyper-competitive lone wolf against the patient, quiet friend. They stood there, hands jammed against the windows and walls, battling through 32 hours of extreme sleep deprivation. Asher was visibly swaying, basically wedging his hand into the window frame so it wouldn't drop if he passed out. Meanwhile, Uthi somehow managed to literally sleep while standing up, keeping his hand perfectly planted. It was a terrifying, almost dangerous test of sheer human willpower.
And then, nature finally made the call. As this massive thunderstorm rolled in outside the window, the pure exhaustion just caught up to Asher. In one split second of lost focus, his hand slipped straight off the wet glass. It wasn't even a close call. After 119 excruciating days of handcuffs, blinding alarms, total isolation, and mind games, Asher was eliminated. The quiet, patient, widely liked Uthi just burst into tears. He had outlasted every single one of them. He kept his promise to his dad, and he walked out with the deed to $1 million mansion. So the absolute biggest takeaway from this whole explainer isn't just about winning real estate. It's a really profound look at what actually sustains us when things get impossibly hard. It wasn't the loudest, most arrogant player who won. It was the guy who stayed patient, built real bonds, and never forgot his why. It really makes you look at your own limits, doesn't it? Seeing what Uthi and the others went through, the sleep deprivation, the alarms, the pure psychological torment, how many days do you honestly think you could endure with your hand glued to that wall? Think about it, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.